Welcome to the Genuine Life Podcast, where we take time to dive deep into conversations, stories, and teachings to help lead people to multiply genuine life in Christ in Greater Austin and beyond.
Hey everyone, Mark Canada here with another edition of our Genuine Life podcast, where we're continuing to cultivate conversations to help inspire and catalyze genuine life in Christ. And I'm so excited about today because as a church, as we think about our vision of reaching every man, woman, and child here in Greater Austin and beyond with the gospel of Jesus Christ, this time here today, we're really focusing on the and beyond piece because that matters so much to us about people from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited today is because of our guests. We have two special guests with us. Many of you know the famous Rachel Parkhurst. So excited that she's here. She is our executive administrative assistant. And then we also have Steve Beirn, who is the director of our Global Ministry. So excited to have both of you guys here. Thanks so much for joining us for our Genuine Life podcast today. And
thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so good to have you guys. And really just want to have a conversation about God's heart for the world. But before we get to that, just want to hear a little bit about you. And so, Rachel, let's start with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, but then also how God has developed in you this passion for the and beyond piece of our vision. So if you could just share a little bit about that with us.
Sure. Well, I was raised in a Christian family. I grew up going to church every Sunday, and even at the age of 11, I went on my first mission trip with the church we were at in Houston at the time, and that, started my passion for the idea of reaching people. Now, that was within the States. We went to Kentucky, worked with Habitat for Humanity. It's not like we traveled around the world, but it gave me my first taste into missions and reaching others. And every year since then, just about, I've had the opportunity to go on another trip and to focus on others. When I was 13, we moved to this area and we attended Hill Country Bible Church, Austin. And so through my high school years, I was actually connected with the youth group there and able to go on a number of mission trips with them as well. So that expanded my global vision for where Jesus wanted to reach the world, and came on staff here back in the day, 2006. And my role here has changed over time on staff. And even back in 2020, when we had a really good global ministry going. We had supported global partners since the very beginning of our church in 2000. We went through a really sad time where we lost Chuck Layden. He was our executive pastor at the time, and he was in charge of our global ministries and overseeing that team. And so at that time, one of the things that I took on was the role of overseeing the global missions here on staff, for him, or just during that transition time. And it really lined up with the passion I already had with wanting to see the world reached with the gospel, the unreached people groups reached with the gospel. And so then it became more like a primary, even work-related thing, as well as a passion. And so since then, we've been kind of growing that ministry and reworking it a little bit. And that's kind of where Steve Beirn comes into play, because it wasn't necessarily my strongest strength, but something that I appreciated and had a passion for.
Yeah.
So it needed a little help. I was barely maintaining, I think, at the time. So that's then when we brought Steve on.
Yeah, well, we've been so grateful for your investment and passion and reaching the nations, Rachel. And Steve, just really excited to have you here. Would love to just hear again a little bit about your story, but then how God has really worked in you this heart and passion to see the nations reach with the gospel.
Well, when I was just a kid, my mother would take me to church, and the influence of that church was significant in my life. And one of the ways the church influenced me was by valuing global outreach. So I saw that ministry grow in the life of the church and in the hearts of people, and it just became a fascination of mine. Then later on, when I was in college, I actually connected with a group of MKs from Africa, and they expressed all of their various kinds of life experiences, overseas separation from families, different boarding school situations, all the ups and downs. But the most remarkable thing about it was every single one of them were intending to go back. and that really impressed me. And I sat down and talked at length with them about why would you go back.
Yeah.
So
Real
that
quick, Steve,
yeah.
I'm curious on that one for people who may not be as familiar with some of the terminology there. Could you just even define what is an MK?
Yeah, an MK is a missionary kid.
Okay.
So it would be a kid that's grown up in like a third culture kid.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So sorry about that.
No, that's good. That's good.
Anyway, so that left some really great impressions on me. I mean, we were in each other's weddings, these guys, and we did everything together. So it was just really quite a close-knit group. Matter of fact, all these years, like over 45 years later, we still get the prayer letter of one of these families. So just been very influential in my life. Mm-hmm. Then when I think my passion continued to be fanned simply because of my own personal study in the Word, things like that, hearing good speakers, it always had an accumulated effect on my life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so then I'm curious for you, Steve, how did that develop even into your career and what you've done for the last 40 years?
Yeah. I've been in the pastorate for 45 years and I'm now retired. Mm-hmm. But in those 45 years, 40 of those 45 years were specifically involved. I was specifically involved in global outreach. Mm-hmm. So handling all kinds of different aspects of it over time and really kind of being one of the people that charted the course, because when I first started this, there weren't a lot of role models out there, many people doing what I was attempting to do. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, and speak to that a little bit, because I think that'd be interesting for people to hear in terms of your role for the last 40 years. What have been some of the things that you've been involved in as it relates to missions?
As it relates to missions here at Parkway? Or
just okay. Over the last 40 years.
Well, one of the things that I became a little bit known for, and that was the church-based missionary preparation or discipleship preparation. At one point in time, we had over 30 going through specific training from others in the church that had the skill sets or the life experience to do that. And then we were able to almost export that a little bit to other churches because other churches were asking for help to do the same thing. And then eventually, Mark, it ended up leading to me writing a book on it because there was enough of an audience that seemed interested in this that I took a year, wrote the book, and after that continued to interact with churches to assist them in their journey to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's great, Steve. Yeah. Now, I want to just say for all of you listening who may not know Steve very well, we actually have a little bit of a past together. We go back into some days back in Pennsylvania where we were on staff together at Calvary Church in Lancaster. And Steve, just wanted to talk a little bit about that, but then also, like, how did you land here at Parkway? What brought you here?
Well, I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row here. I would say my journey to Parkway was pretty basic. The journey began a few years before I retired. And our daughter that lives in the Pflugerville area and her family contacted us to say that they really wanted Lorraine and I to consider retiring in Pflugerville by them. So my daughter knew that I was on this countdown of about 2 years to do that, and she said, no, you really need to come and stay with us. Mm. So that was the beginning of a process whereby we thought through everything, and in the end decided that with 2 of our 3 kids here, that it was a great opportunity really for us. And then it was just a wide variety of circumstances that ended up leading us to Parkway, one of which was, multiplication emphasis and disciple making here was just so healthy, just so well articulated, and we loved that. And we also wanted to help in some of the areas where there wasn't quite the confidence to move forward with, like, the global side of things. And the global side is really kind of my bailiwick. That's what I've done my whole life. So yeah. I thought, well, maybe they might take an old retired pastor and do something with him. So that's kind of what happened. That's what led us here, and we've been entirely happy.
Well, we're so excited that you're here. And when you say taking an old retired pastor, it's kind of like we've invited Michael Jordan or LeBron James on the team. So we're so grateful to have you. And
thanks.
Would love to just even hear from the both of you guys, just to talk a little bit about that transition of Rachel, like when you took over, what was happening in Global, and then Steve coming on. Just share a little bit about what's been happening here recently and what we're seeing happening in the Global Ministries at Parkway and where you guys see it going.
Mm-hmm. Well, initially, when our church was planted by Hill Country in 2000, there was a number of missionaries we now call global partners, who Hill Country was connected with and supported, and we really saw the purpose and need to invest in them as well. And so from the beginning, we have supported international missions with people. And there were even, about 12 years I was volunteering with student ministry, and every year, every summer, we took 1 or 2 trips with students to broaden their horizon of like, what does missions look like? And some things were more local and some things were more international. And while it's good to support missionaries, it felt a little bit narrow-minded or short-sighted. Like there's a broader vision out there to be had, and I didn't quite have the vision for it. It was like I was kind of able to maintain what had been started, making sure we're supporting global partners. But when it came to being more of a visionary for it, Steve's really been able to step in and bring new ideas and kind of freshen up the team and kick off some support teams for global partners, and even start some new continuous long-term or short-term trips that we can do with long-term partnerships.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't have Rachel and her history and context, we would be in probably hot water at this point in time.
Yeah.
So we've really, I've enjoyed all of my interaction with Rachel and the ability to work together to get things done. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a matter of me having been down the road a couple times, a little bit further than Parkway, and then bringing that life and ministry experience to Parkway so that we can get Parkway into what they should be doing for the days ahead, for the future. So the future is as healthy as the present or the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good.
Yep.
And, I think it'd be good even for us as we talk about global partners, as we talk about global emphasis and missions, I think there can be some misconceived ideas of what that actually is. Because,
Sure.
Here at Parkway, we talk a lot about reaching every man, woman, and child here in Greater Austin, living on mission. But I think when we look at the scriptures, there's a difference between evangelism and what we would call missions. And so, Steve, I wonder if you could just talk to that a little bit to help us understand what really is missions.
Well, just to back up, evangelism is helping people believe in Jesus. Missions is helping people know there's a Jesus to believe in. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of a difference there, and both are necessary. You want everything. It's not either or, it's both and. Mm-hmm. But we have felt the need to strengthen the ties of the missions end of things. And the Lord has gradually been enabling us to find others in the church that are sympathetic to this and wanting to help out. And so we've developed a team. We're doing a few things that really can begin to take the church further down the road. So, yeah, we're very excited about it. There have been the creation of a number of things that we now know will be over the long haul really good for Parkway and really good for our global partners.
Yeah, no, that's such a helpful distinction for us to be able to think through and know that difference and to clarify that. Now, when I think about the world, obviously so many people, and the task is so big as it relates to the end beyond of reaching every man, woman, and child. And so I'd love for us to just talk a little bit about like what is the task at hand? What is kind of this missionary journey that we're on, and why does it matter so much? And so Steve, would love to just ask you, like, what is this task at hand and why does it matter so much?
And Rachel, you should be the one to be able to correct me or to direct and share whatever else you would like to.
You've got
I would say that we are called to make disciples of all ethnic groups of the world. And by doing that, it's helpful to know where the ethnic groups are, because that begins to drive strategy and ministry and really effective and obedient responsiveness to the gospel, to the Great Commission. So all of those things, they all are interrelated. So at this point in time, for instance, we have done some concentration on looking at either the Muslim, Buddhist, or the Hindu worlds. And in doing so, we've been aware of the fact that 95% of all the remaining unreached people groups in the world exist within these 3 religious blocks.
Wow.
So that's why we felt we could be a little bit more strategic. And part of this is getting a church or getting Parkway to begin to understand that they are somewhat responsible, along with every other church, to helping to complete the Great Commission. It's not enough just to participate in it, but the original command given to us was with the intention that we would complete it. So that's why we're looking at it a little bit more strategically and carefully, and then that helps us develop all kinds of opportunities for creative outreach and ministry in the days ahead.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And, I know as we talk about unreached people groups, that's such an important word for us because, like we've said, the missionary task of completing the Great Commission so that everyone has a chance to respond to Jesus. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Steve, and I'm curious if you know this. I'm going to test you a little bit.
Won't be the last time.
I'm going to test you a little bit here. Is when we think about that task of unreached people groups, do we have a sense or an idea of like how much of the world is there still to be reached? Are there some percentages that you know of what's reached versus unreached?
Well, I'm just going to give you some very broad, basic stats on this. The number of unreached people groups in the world, or the number of people groups, I should say, to start off with, some of them have been reached, is about 17,000 different ethnic groups of people in the world. Out of those 17,000, probably they say around 40 to 41% still are without any access to the gospel whatsoever. So it's pretty stunning to think that after all these years there still is quite a bit of work to be done.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that every single person in every one of these groups has to be reached, but there has to be the establishment of a reproducing church there and the presence of the gospel so that there is ready access for these people. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and Parkway can have a really wonderful share in that because we have an opportunity to actually write missions history. Yeah.
And when you talk about those unreached people groups, I know you had alluded to in the Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist world, and where approximately is that? Just as we look at a map or think about a map, where would that be?
Well, if you were to take West Africa, the central part of West Africa, and draw a line and go straight across the globe, you'd go across India and Southeast Asia. It's in the missiological term is the 1040 window. And you would look at that and you would be able to capture the vast majority of unreached people groups by just following that little window of geography all the way across to Southeast Asia and beyond.
Yeah.
So that's really where all the action should be.
Yeah.
So
No, that's so helpful to know that. And too, even for us as a church, to really begin to pray for that area of the world and to consider how can we be a part of sending and going to that area to be about reaching every man, woman, and child.
That's right.
And, I think sometimes when we think about missions or going global, it can sound so big and just so out there and removed from our lives that we kind of just put it out there and say that may be for other people, not so much for me. And I don't know if maybe you're listening and you even feel like that, but Rachel and Steve, could you just maybe talk to what have been some of the obstacles that you've heard people kind of throw up of saying, yeah, I don't know that missions or global ministry is something for me. What have been some of the things that you've heard over the years people say?
I think like with most anything that you're going to choose to do, time and money are your first obstacles to any change in your normal rhythm of life. Traveling does cost money. And so there's this hesitation of, I don't know if I have it or if I want to spend it on that. And then sometimes I think we can get in our mind that to go on mission either means for my lifetime or for a really long time, like at least a month at a time. And there's really opportunities to go over a weekend. There's short-term things that you can do. So you didn't ask about solutions, but you just asked about challenges at this point. Those would be my top two.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Steve?
Well, I think there is sometimes either a thought of, well, I think the ones who are doing it are the experts and they can get it done. Over time, it'll still get done. The gap will close. It'll be okay. They don't need me. So they don't think of themselves specifically in terms of application of the Great Commission.
Or, I'm not skilled. I don't have the knowledge. I don't
That's
know
right.
how to.
That's right. I don't have the background. I
I'm too
don't have the
scared
education.
to.
When in fact the church probably has most of the resources to be able to equip people to do a wide variety of things and to be effective overseas if the Lord is beginning to direct them to do so.
Yeah.
So some of it is mindset too, and it's just something that gradually has to be overcome. And some of that is by getting people overseas, by doing some of these things. And we're seeing a little bit of that. We're seeing some movement with people getting a little more excited or curious or interested, or a little bit more of the can-do attitude.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think, when we come back to the why, like, why would we care about this? Well, the why behind that is because this is what Jesus has called us to. And then when we think about God's global mission from the very beginning of time to what he's doing today into eternity, is he's drawing people to himself, and he uses people to reach people. And the why is that he's called us to go make disciples of all nations, all ethnic groups. And that as the church, that's our mission. That's what we're to be about. And so I think the why is so clear, but sometimes the how we get about that can be confusing because of some of the obstacles, but then lack of clarity. And so I'm curious, just if you could help us, what would be some maybe next steps or practical things that people of Parkway or people listening in could even begin taking in their life now to be involved in this global mission?
Well, let me just suggest a couple things. First of all, any person, young or old, can pray. So we have a prayer guide for our global partners that's available in the church. It's on a table just outside of some of the reconfiguring children's ministry area that looks so nice now. And so something like that, a family could begin to develop something with their own children or on their own. So, but in addition, you have like Barnabas teams where people can get connected, relationally invested in the life of a global partner and care for them. So that's another thing. Something else could be the short-term trips that Rachel has alluded to, because those become sometimes powerful experiences for just having a reality check on how much you really know and understand the world around you. And then one of the other things that we're trying to do over time now is, and we should be, I use the word operational by the 19th of May, so it'd be the Sunday following Mother's Day. That is, we're going to be opening up the new ministry called Embark. And that's going to help train people over a 2-year period of time, and to train them in either being effective at sending or effective at going. And that's going to be able to help us really launch joyfully with a lot greater effectiveness. So that's just another option that people can consider. But there are numerous options. People just don't usually, in their busyness, take a lot of time to think about that unless someone comes alongside of them and says, have you ever considered this?
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of the linkage with those that have done it, with those that need to have the experience.
Yeah. Rachel, would you add anything to that?
Sure. I think even, especially for those who feel like missions is way beyond anything they think about, it's no small thing to start by blessing your neighbor. Like, that is something, a strategy we talk about here a lot too, in eventually getting to where you can disciple somebody. Start by thinking about who's around you and thinking about, we use the term like the nations have come to our neighborhoods. We can reach unreached here, although they do have more access to things living here than they would in a country where there are no churches or Bibles or Christians. But that's a great first step, is caring about the people who are around you. And our blessed strategy is to begin with prayer, like Steve had said, praying for other people. L is for listening to them, just taking time to have conversations. You can eat together is the E, spending time over tea or coffee or even a meal. And then to serve each other, to allow them to serve you or to choose to serve them. And then that often leads to conversations that you can bring up spiritual matters, and you share God's stories. That's second S, and bless. And when you start with that, it just can grow from there, and God can really light your heart on fire.
Yeah.
Because you desire to do it more. And then it can have a broader vision from there as well. I would also say we have partnerships with what we call compassion ministries here at Parkway, and one of those is English language ambassadors. And it's where we partner with folks in our community who have recently come, refugees who have come from different countries, and they really want to learn English. They want to be able to be part of the culture here and to speak and learn English. And so you would sign up to be basically somebody's friend, and you would go to their house and have tea with them, and you work on conversational English together. And a lot of times that's going to lead, again, to spiritual conversations. You'll talk about all different kinds of things. And it's not that every time you're going to share the gospel, but you're building a relationship with somebody. And as you care about them, you're going to care for their soul and want to talk about the gospel as well. And so, you can find out more information about that specific ministry, on our website, and a lot of the things that Steve is mentioning about our global ministries are on our global page of our website as well. I think sometimes it's helpful too. Every time we have a global partner or a couple that come in town and we're able to host them on a Sunday, we try to do a global lunch for them after church. And so just to come and hear their story, what does your ministry look like? What does it look like to work in India or in West Africa? Keep an eye out for things that are going on where you can just become more knowledgeable about it. And I think that builds your desire to want to be more connected.
Yeah, that's really, really good.
So it could become something as simple as building a friendship in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth. And that takes some time, but that would breathe life into a person's Christian walk and life experience. And it could be something as basic as that.
Yeah. I love how you leaned into that piece of, it's one thing that we need to pray and we need to ask God to break our hearts for what's happening globally. But if we're not involved locally, it's really hard to even see how we could be involved globally. But those are a both and, not an either or, that God has called us to reach every man, woman, and child here in Greater Austin and beyond, and to pay attention to the and beyond who's come to Greater Austin, but not just exclusively that, to be thinking about the 1040 window, those unreached people groups that we need to be about, raising up more and more disciple makers to be sent out to reach people groups that haven't been reached.
Something else that's really cool about being able to reach the nations that are here is if they have the opportunity to go back. And if they still have family back home or friends, even for global partners and missionaries and mission agencies that are overseas, kind of their ultimate goal is to work themselves out of a job. You really want the ethnicities to share the gospels with their own kind.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful, guys. This has been such a really good conversation, just to hear how God has worked in your lives to develop a passion for the unreached and least reached, but then to see here at Parkway what God has been doing, what he's continuing to do, and what he's going to do in and through the life of Parkway. And we're so excited really about the vision, the big vision that God's given us of reaching every man, woman, and child here in Greater Austin and beyond. And we want to continue to pray that God will develop that in us as a church, through us as a people. And so again, just want to say to everyone who's tuning in today, thank you so much for listening to this conversation, and our hope and our prayer that this conversation will cultivate a passion for the nations, for the least reached, that we're here as a family together, but we want to be about equipping, sending, and ultimately going so that every man, woman, and child can know the love of Jesus. So thanks again for tuning in to an edition of the Genuine Life podcast, and we'll catch you again next time.